The hospital's ceiling tiles were the same shade of white as the ones in room 14 where I'd spent most of my shift. It's funny how you notice small things like that when your body finally stops listening to you. It was 2:17 in the middle of the night. I was lying in a hospital bed with an 4 needle taped to the inside of my elbow, staring at those ceiling tiles when my phone buzzed. An Instagram notification. A post from my stepsister, Paige. I tapped it. She was sitting on my couch. My couch. In my house. Holding a glass of red wine with a smile so wide it looked like she was performing for a camera. Caption read, "Peaceful evening. No chaos. No drama. Truly blessed." 43 likes. A row of laughing emojis. And right there, near the top of the reactions, I saw a heart from my stepmother, Carol. A heart. While I was lying in an emergency room alone, with a drip bag in my arm and a diagnosis of severe exhaustion. But here's the thing. That Instagram post? That was actually the smallest betrayal of the whole night. The thing I didn't know yet, the thing that would make my hand shake harder than any 14-hour shift ever could, was still waiting for me inside a credit report I had never once thought to check in 34 years of my life. Before I go on, I have to ask you something. If this story is already hitting you somewhere deep, if something in your chest just got tight, please hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel. I share real stories here, stories about survival, about family, about what it really means to protect yourself and the people you love. Subscribe so you don't miss a single one. And drop your location and the time in the comments. I genuinely love knowing where in the world you are listening from right now. My name is Rachel Calloway. I am 34 years old. I live in Harwick, Ohio, a small town where most people know their neighbors by name, where the same families show up at the same church every Sunday, and where news, good or bad, travels faster than you would expect. I am an emergency room nurse and a single mom to an 8-year-old girl named Sophie. My biological mother, Anna, passed away from a sudden brain bleed when I was just 6 years old. My father, Dennis, remarried 3 years after that. Her name was Carol. She came with a daughter of her own, Paige, who was 4 years old at the time. For most of my childhood, I told myself we were a real family. It took me 28 more years to understand what was truly happening inside those walls. Let me take you back to a Thursday evening in November in Harwick, Ohio. Kind of town where the same families have sat in the same church pews for 3 generations. Where the hardware store owner knows your father's name and the school secretary knew your grandmother. The kind of cold night that gets through your jacket no matter how many layers you wear. I was working a shift at Harwick Regional Medical Center on East Birch Street, right in the heart of town. Nothing fancy about that place. Floor wax smell. Buzzing lights. That strange late-night quiet of a hospital that isn't actually quiet at all. I was 9 hours into a shift that was only supposed to be 8 hours. A coworker had called in sick, and because I always stayed, because I had been the person who always stayed my entire adult life, I stayed again. My hands started shaking somewhere around hour 11. Not the kind of shaking people can see. Kind you hide. You press your palm flat against the medicine cart. You breathe slowly through counting the pills. You smile at the patient in bed 6 and pretend your vision isn't going blurry at the edges. By hour 13, the lights above me had soft rings around them. By hour 14, I was walking down the west hallway carrying a stack of patient files when my knees gave out first. Then the floor came up fast. I don't remember hitting the ground. I remember the sound of papers scattering. I remember a voice shouting my name from somewhere down the hall. And then I remember ceiling tiles again. 1, 2, 3. The oxygen mask. Someone saying my name very gently, like they weren't sure I could hear. Severe dehydration. Total exhaustion collapse. That's what they wrote on my chart. They wanted to keep me overnight. I didn't argue. My body had already made that decision for me. Here's where things start to get complicated. The hospital's emergency contact system automatically called the numbers on file. First, my father, Dennis Calloway, who lives at 6 Birchwood Court, right on the east side of Harwick. No answer. Second, my stepmother, Carol Calloway, same address. Voicemail. My daughter Sophie was home with Carol. That was our usual arrangement on my night shifts. Carol usually watched her without any problem. But nobody had called me back to confirm anything. I picked up my phone to text Carol. And that's when I saw Paige's post. I stared at it for a long time. Longer than made sense. I kept looking at my stepmother's heart reaction. Not a message saying, "Hope you're okay, I heard from the hospital." Not even a worried text. Just a heart on a photo of her daughter sitting on my couch with a wine glass while I was lying unconscious 40 minutes away. I took a screenshot. I don't fully know why. Instinct, maybe. Or maybe the part of me that had spent 28 years quietly collecting moments like this one had finally decided it was time to start keeping proof. I stared at the ceiling until the drip bag put me to sleep. They sent me home the next morning just after 7. I drove myself. Window cracked. Cold November air sharp and clean against my face on Route 9 heading back into Harwick. Sophie's school started at 8 and I still needed to get her there. The house at 6, Birchwood Court, had belonged to my grandmother on my mother's side. Her name was Eleanor. She passed away when I was 21 and she left that house to me in her will. Inside the envelope, she had tucked a handwritten note. "You're the one who loved this house the way I did, Rachel. Keep it safe." 3 bedrooms. Porch step that squeaked. A big maple tree in the backyard that dropped leaves all the way into December. The official property deed at the county recorder's office listed exactly one name. Rachel and Calloway. Sole owner. I walked through the front door. Dennis was at the kitchen table with the newspaper, his reading glasses sitting at the very end of his nose. He looked up at me for a second. "You look fine. You probably just overdid it." He went back to the paper. Carol was at the stove, her back to me. "There's fresh coffee," she said. Paige was on the sofa scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up at all. I stood in the hallway of my own home and counted to 5 inside my head. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody asked what the doctors said. Nobody even said good morning. I went upstairs. Sophie was already dressed, sitting on her bed with her backpack on, waiting the way she always waited, quietly, patiently, without complaint, because she had learned very early that I was always the one who came back. She threw herself at me the second I opened the door. "Mama, Grandpa said you were just tired." "I'm okay, baby." I held her a little tighter than I meant to. "You don't feel tired. You feel like you're squeezing me too hard." I laughed, and it came out slightly broken. "Let me get changed. I'll take you to school." When I came back downstairs, I noticed something on the kitchen table. A white envelope with a county court return address on it, addressed to Dennis Calloway. I didn't open it. It wasn't my mail. But something made me stop and look at it for a few extra seconds. Something quiet and cold in the back of my mind. I didn't know what was inside it yet, but I would soon. And when I did, it was going to change everything. 1 week later, I was back at work. Shorter hours, strict orders from my charge nurse. My body was slowly recovering. My mind, though, was going in circles I couldn't explain yet. The hospital's billing department needed updated financial information for my ER visit. Insurance stuff, mostly. The billing coordinator, a kind woman named Sheila who wore her reading glasses on a beaded chain, suggested I check my credit report. "Just to make sure there are no holds or problems on your insurance claims," she told me. "It happens more than people realize." I had never once checked my credit report. Not in 34 years. I had no loans. I owned my house with no mortgage. I paid every single bill on time every month without fail. There was nothing to check. Or so I believed with my whole heart. That evening I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage with my laptop balanced on my knees. Engine off. Concrete walls glowing with other people's headlights moving past. I went to annualcreditreport.com and pulled up all 3 credit reports. The number hit me like cold water. Credit score 511. That made absolutely no sense. I had 0 debt. I had never missed a single payment. Something had to be wrong with the website. Then I saw the accounts. 3 credit cards I had never opened in my life. One with a balance of $19,400. One with $16,800. One with $11,200. Total $47,400. All opened within the last 4 years. Small payments made for a couple of months on each one, then nothing at all. Past due. Sent to collections. My hands started shaking exactly the way they had on hour 11 of my last shift. But this was something completely different. This wasn't exhaustion. I called the number listed for Lakeview Credit Union. A man named Marcus Webb, a senior accounts analyst at the Harwick branch on Main Street, picked up. I confirmed my identity. Date of birth. Last 4 digits of my social security number. My mother's maiden name. Coleman. There was a pause before he answered that told me everything. Ms. Calloway. The applications for all 3 accounts were filed using your social security number. The billing address on all of them is your home address on Birchwood Court. He emailed me the scanned original applications that same night. I drove to the parking lot of a gas station 2 streets from my house before I opened the email. I didn't want to be inside my home when I read them. The handwriting on the first application leaned slightly to the left. The exact same tilt I had watched for 30 years sign birthday cards, school permission slips, and church-giving envelopes. Capital D in the last name had a small loop at the top that my father had always written the exact same way since I was a child. Dennis Raymond Calloway. He hadn't even tried to copy my handwriting. He had simply signed his own name onto my life and assumed I would never look. I sat in that dark parking lot with the engine off and the screen glowing in my face. $47,400. Nearly 2 full years of my take-home pay after taxes. Money I never borrowed. Money I never touched. Money that had been slowly destroying my credit score while I worked double shifts to keep the lights on in a house he called home without ever paying a single dollar of rent. I thought about the timeline. Dennis had lost his warehouse job 5 years ago. He filed for disability, got turned down. He was home most days after that. I would see him on his laptop late at night sometimes. I always just figured he was watching sports or reading the news. Just passing the time the way people do when they feel stuck. Now I understood exactly what those late nights really were. I picked up my phone and called Jess Hartwell. We had met during our first year at Ohio Wesleyan University before she went on to law school and I went to nursing school. She had practiced property and family law for years now in a town called Fairmont, about 35 minutes east of Harwick on Route 40. We still called each other every few months, the way close friends do when they never fully let go of the thread. "Jess," I said when she picked up, "I think my father has been stealing my identity. I need your help." Silence. 2 full seconds. "Don't say a single word to him about this. Don't bring it up at all. Come to my office tomorrow morning and bring everything you have." She paused right before she hung up. "Rachel, check Sophie's credit too." I went completely still. Sophie was 8 years old. "Now I want you to stay with me here. 'Cause this is the part of the story where I need you to understand something important before we go any further. If you are watching this and you have a child any age, please do not leave this video without checking their credit report. I am going to explain exactly how to do it before this story ends. What I found next, I would not wish on any parent. Not ever. That night, I waited until Sophie was asleep. I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, left her bedroom door open just a crack the way she liked it, and went to my own room and shut the door. Checking the credit report of a child is not simple. You have to contact each of the 3 main credit bureaus separately. You need to send the child's social security number, a copy of their birth certificate, and your own ID as the parent. I started the process online. One bureau came back with a result within the hour. Credit card. Pinned 7 months ago. In the name of Sophie Marie Calloway. Balance, $1,400. I closed the laptop very slowly. She was 8 years old. She still needed help tying the laces on her sneakers some mornings. And someone had used her social security number, a number I kept inside a locked metal box in my bedroom closet, to open a line of credit in her name. I got up and walked to the closet. The metal box was there. The lock looked normal. But when I opened it, the papers inside were slightly out of order. My original birth certificate gone. My old social security card gone. Sophie's card was still in there, but the folder it sat in had been touched recently. Papers were slightly shifted. Someone had been careful, but not careful enough. You can steal from me. You can post laughing emojis on the internet while I am alone in a hospital bed. You can sign court papers and call me unstable and build a whole story around my exhaustion. But the moment you put my daughter's name on a debt she does not even know exists, that is a line you do not come back from. I didn't go downstairs. I didn't scream. I didn't do anything dramatic at all. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and made a careful list of everything I was going to need. Credit reports. The property deed. Sophie's birth certificate. The scanned signature pages. Every document my lawyer would need to build an airtight case. And that envelope from the county court sitting on the kitchen table. I still didn't know what was inside it. I was about to find out. And what was in it was worse than anything I had imagined. Jess Hartwell's office sat above a small insurance company on Maple Row in downtown Fairmont, about a 10-minute walk from the courthouse. No fancy waiting room. No city skyline view. Just a woman behind a desk covered in files, holding a red pen that never stopped moving. She read through my credit reports without saying a word. Just the red pen moving. "This is textbook family identity theft," she said at last. "It's a federal crime. All 3 accounts use your social security number, your home address, and a forged signature." I handed her my phone showing the photo I had taken of the county court envelope still sitting on Dennis's kitchen table. She studied the return address, turned to her computer, typed, and scrolled. She stopped. Her jaw got tight. Just a tiny bit. Jess was never the type to overreact to anything. That small shift in her face was the same as someone else going completely white. "Rachel." She turned her screen toward me. Petition for guardianship of Rachel and Calloway. Filed by Dennis R. Calloway. The stated reason. Respondent has a documented history of medical episodes that point to reduced mental ability and inability to manage her own personal affairs. Under supporting witnesses, 2 names. Carol Calloway. Paige Norris. Petition had been filed 4 days after my last hospitalization. 4 days. They had been watching. They had been watching me get worn down, watching me push myself past every limit, watching me collapse, and they had been quietly building legal paperwork around every single moment of it. "If this petition goes through," Jess said quietly, "your father becomes your legal guardian. He would take control of your finances. He could approve the sale of your property. My house. My grandmother's house. The house on Birchwood Court in Harwick that Eleanor left to me with a handwritten note and a prayer. Dennis had lived in that house rent-free for 11 years while taking out credit cards in my name and simply waiting for me to break down enough that he could take everything else I owned. My stepmother had signed a sworn legal statement calling me mentally unfit. The very same woman who had clicked a heart emoji on her daughter's Instagram post while I was lying in the ER. And my stepsister Paige had signed it too. Paige, who I had grown up alongside since I was 9 years old. Who had borrowed my car without asking. Who had eaten meals I cooked and slept under a roof I owned. She had signed her name to a document designed to take away my legal right to run my own life. I sat with all of that for a long moment. Then I said, "What do I do?" "We move carefully," Jess said. "And we move fast." That same evening, I was in the kitchen putting together Sophie's after-school snack when Dennis came in from the garage. He poured himself a glass of water and stood at the counter with his back to me. "I want you to understand something here. I already had every document I needed. I had a lawyer. I had a plan. But I needed to see his face. Not to fight with him. Just to know. To understand in the most human way possible whether any part of him had hesitated before he did what he did to his own daughter and granddaughter." "Dad," I said, "have you ever used my social security number for anything?" He didn't turn around. "What kind of question is that?" "A simple one." He set his glass down, turned slowly. His face was flat and blank, the face of a man who had already practiced this conversation in his head. "Of course not. Why on earth would I?" I checked my credit report. 3 accounts. Over $47,000. 2 full seconds of silence. Credit reports have errors all the time. You know that. Don't blow this up into something it isn't. The handwriting on the applications is yours, Dad. His eyes moved. Just for half a second. Tiny crack. Then it closed right back up. "I don't know what you think you saw, but I'm not going to sit here in my own home and be accused of something like that." Carol appeared in the kitchen doorway. She had been in the hallway listening. She always listened from the hallway. "What's going on in here?" Dennis spoke before I could. "She's starting again, Carol." Carol looked at me with that particular expression she had perfected over 25 years. Patient. Tired. The look of a woman performing concern very convincingly. "Rachel, honey, you just got out of the hospital. You might not be thinking completely clearly right now." I looked at her. Then at Dennis. Then I stood up from the table. "Okay," I said. I walked to the stairs. I was 4 steps up when I heard it. Dennis's voice, tight and low, aimed at Carol. He had never learned how far sound traveled in that house. He never paid enough attention to anything in it. "She knows something. We need to move up our timeline." I stopped on step 4. I did not turn around. I kept my hand on the railing, kept my face calm, and kept walking up. He had just handed me exactly what I needed to know. Stay with me, because what happens next is where things start to turn completely in my favor. But first, if you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now. Seriously. 'Cause what I did at that church with a single folder of documents is something I don't want you to miss. Hit subscribe and let's keep going. The next morning, Paige called me. Her voice was soft and careful. The act had already begun. "Hey, I heard you were upset about some money stuff. Dad mentioned it. I just wanted to check in on you." "Did he?" "We're all worried about you, Rachel. After what happened at the hospital, we just think maybe you need someone to help you handle things for a while." "Someone like Dad?" A pause. I could hear the silence while she figured out what to say next. "Just temporarily. You've been through so much. You've collapsed twice in 3 years. I collapsed because I work 70 hours a week to keep a roof over 4 people's heads in my house. It's the family house. Read the deed, Paige." She hung up. 20 minutes later, Dennis called. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to it sitting in the school pickup line, watching Sophie's teachers wave the kids out through the front doors while my father's voice played through my earphones. "You need to stop this right now. I am your father. Everything I have ever done has been for this family. If you push this, Rachel, you will have nobody left. And I have already spoken to Pastor Henderson over at Grace Community Church. We are having a family meeting this Sunday to work through this the proper way, the way families do." I saved that voicemail. Then Sophie ran to my car with her backpack bouncing and a drawing flapping in her hand. "Mama! I made this for you." It was a picture of a person on a horse. Brown horse, big smile on the rider. "That's you," she said proudly. "Because horses are the strongest." I folded it and put it right into my bag, sitting next to my folder full of bank documents and court filings. 2 days after that, Jess filed a legal motion to throw out the guardianship petition. She attached a letter from my personal doctor, Dr. Sandra Reeves of Harwick Family Medicine on Grove Street, confirming that both of my hospital visits were caused by physical exhaustion and severe dehydration, not any kind of mental illness, not reduced thinking ability, not any issue with my judgment whatsoever. She also attached the identity theft report showing that Dennis had a very clear financial reason to want legal control over me. She attached the FTC case numbers. She attached the police report. Because yes, I had filed a police report. I had walked into the Harwick Police Department on Cedar Lane on a Wednesday afternoon, set the credit reports, the scanned signature pages, and the FTC confirmation letters on the desk of an officer named Sergeant Tara Nolan, and said calmly, "I need to file an identity theft report. Person who did this is my father. He currently lives in my house." Sergeant Nolan had looked at the documents, looked at me, and said, "Take a seat. This is going to take a while." Took an hour and 40 minutes. She was completely thorough. She gave me a case number and her direct phone line before I left. The night before the church meeting, I listened to Dennis's voicemail one final time in my dark bedroom. "If you push this, you will have nobody left." I sat with that for a few minutes. I let it do whatever it was going to do to me. Then I opened my laptop and sent Jess 3 words by email. "I'm ready. Sunday. Grace Community Church sits on the corner of Cedar Way and Oakwood Drive in Harwick, Ohio. White brick walls. Tall, narrow windows. A parking lot that fills up every Sunday morning and empties out by noon. I was baptized in that church. Sophie was baptized in that church. My grandmother Eleanor's memorial service was held in the front pews there 13 years ago on a gray December morning. Dennis knew all of that when he picked it. After the morning service ended, he stood up near the refreshment table in the fellowship hall and told people the family was having an informal gathering. Would anyone who cared about his daughter like to stay? He had been working the room all week long. I found this out later. Private phone calls. Side conversations after Wednesday evening Bible study. He had set it up very carefully. "We are worried about Rachel. She hasn't been herself. We would really appreciate your support." 30 people pulled folding chairs into a rough circle. The chairs scraped against the linoleum floor with a sound like something slowly breaking. The lights above hummed at exactly the same pitch as the ones in the emergency room where I'd woken up 10 days earlier. I noticed that. Pastor Henderson sat at the front of the circle, a Bible on his knee, looking like a man who had agreed to run a meeting he was already not sure about. Dennis sat directly across. Pressed shirt. Teddy's serious expression. Carol sat beside him, eyes already pink, a folded tissue ready in her hand. Paige sat on his other side, arms crossed, jaw tight. I walked in with Sophie. She had her sketch pad and her colored pencils in a little zippered case. I found 2 chairs near the door and sat down. 30 faces turned toward us. Some looked sympathetic. Some just curious. A few had that particular look people get when they have already made up their minds about what they are looking at. Dennis cleared his throat. "Thank you all so much for being here," he began. "As some of you may already know, Rachel has been going through an extremely hard time. She has been in the hospital twice in the last 3 years." He let that land for a moment. "Carol and I have been very worried. We have tried our best to help. We just want to make sure she gets the right support before something truly serious happens." Carol pressed the tissue to her eyes right on cue. A small, controlled little sob. A ripple of sympathy moved through the chairs. Heads nodded slowly. I watched it happen. I watched 30 people who had known me my entire life quietly adjust their picture of me, based on the word of a man who had been stealing from me for years. Dennis kept going. I know this is hard to hear, but Rachel has been making some very poor decisions lately, accusing her own family of serious crimes. He paused just long enough to let the word crime settle. Threatening to sell the family home. The murmuring got louder. A woman I knew well, Beverly Turner, who taught the children's Sunday school class and had watched me grow up in that building since I was 12, shook her head slowly. Poor thing, she whispered to the woman beside her. A man named Carl Ruiz, who owned the hardware store on Main Street in Harwick, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. Sounds like she really does need someone keeping an eye on things for her. Dennis nodded. Grateful. Humble. Perfectly calculated. Paige wiped the corner of her eye with one finger. Her mascara didn't budge a single bit. I noticed that. Sophie sketched quietly beside me. A horse first. Then a small house. Pastor Henderson shifted in his chair. He looked at Dennis. Then at me. Something in his expression was not settled. Something was still trying to work itself out. Dennis, he said carefully. Did Rachel actually know this meeting was being planned? She's here, isn't she? Pastor Henderson turned toward me. Rachel, would you like to say something? Before I could open my mouth, Paige jumped in. See. She turned to face the room with her palms out. This is exactly what happens every single time. She makes everything about herself. We try to have one honest family conversation and suddenly she is the victim. Carol let out a longer sob. I cannot watch my stepdaughter destroy herself like this. We are only here because we love her so much. Dennis stepped back in front of me in the conversation the way he always had, his whole life. This is precisely what we have been dealing with. She cannot handle even a basic discussion without it turning into a confrontation. This has been going on for years. Several heads nodded. Carl Ruiz shook his. Beverly reached over and squeezed Carol's hand. I looked around the room. 30 people who had watched me grow up in this building. Who had handed me little paper cups of grape juice at communion since I was 5 years old. And they were looking at me the way you look at someone you have already decided to feel sorry for. I looked down at Sophie. She had moved on from the horse. She was drawing 2 people now. Taller one had curly hair. Just like mine. Every single second I stayed quiet, Dennis's version of the truth got stronger by default. I had spent 34 years staying quiet. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I want you to understand that very clearly. Not once. Not even close. I had learned something in 12 years of working in emergency rooms. The person talking the loudest is almost never the one holding the most important information. I reached into my bag and placed a plain manila folder flat on the table in front of me. The room went completely still. You could hear the coffee machine bubbling in the corner. Sophie's pencil moving on paper. A single chair creaking. But every single voice stopped. I am glad everyone is here today, I said. Because there are some things this community genuinely deserves to know. I opened the folder and lifted out the first document. Held it up where the whole room could see. This house, the house my family has been living in, the house Dennis keeps calling the family home, belongs to me. I am the sole owner. My grandmother Eleanor left it to me 13 years ago when she passed. This is the official property deed. One name on it. My name. Only my name. I set it flat on the table. Dennis's mouth opened. Nothing came out. My father, my stepmother, and my stepsister have lived in my house completely free of charge for 11 straight years. I never once asked any of them for $1 of rent. I pulled out the next page. 3 credit cards were opened in my name without my knowledge and without my permission. Total amount $47,400. The handwriting on the original application forms belongs to my father. I have confirmed this directly with the bank. I set the copies of the signed applications down beside the credit report. A sound moved through the room that wasn't quite a gasp, more like the breath 30 people take at the exact same moment when something they believe turns out to be completely wrong. Dennis stood up from his chair. That is an absolute lie. The bank confirmed it. I have a case number from the Federal Trade Commission and an active police report on file at the Harwick Police Department on Cedar Lane. I reached back into the folder. 7 months ago, someone opened a credit account in the name of my 8-year-old daughter. Beverly Turner's hand flew to her mouth. Pastor Henderson turned very slowly and looked directly at Dennis. Sophie is 8 years old, I said. She still needs help sometimes with her shoelaces. And someone used her social security number, a number I keep inside a locked box in my own bedroom, to open a $1,400 credit account in her name. The room had physically changed. I could feel it like a shift in air pressure. People who had been leaning toward Dennis were now sitting up straight. Carl Ruiz had uncrossed his arms completely. Beverly had quietly pulled her hand away from Carol's. But that is still not all, I said. I kept my voice perfectly steady. No anger. No tears. Just facts, one at a time, placed on the table like cards dealt from a clean deck. 4 days after my last hospital visit, my father filed a legal petition at the Morrow County Courthouse to have me declared legally unable to manage my own affairs. I set the printed court record flat on the table. This is a public document. Anyone can look it up. If this petition had gone through, my father would have been named my legal guardian. He would have controlled all of my money. He would have had the legal right to sell my house. The house he does not own. To pay off debts he ran up in my name. I looked directly at Dennis. His face had gone from red to a pale gray I had never seen on him before. Carol signed this petition as a supporting witness. I held the page up so the entire room could see her signature clearly. My stepmother of 25 years. Signing a legal document stating I am mentally unfit to run my own life. Carol's sobs stopped completely. And Paige signed it too. Paige, whose arms were already wrapped around herself so tightly her knuckles had gone white, pressed even tighter. She signed a sworn legal statement that I am not capable of managing my own life. I looked at my stepsister. Go ahead, Paige. Tell everyone here what Dad promised you from the sale of my house. Paige's mouth opened. Closed. She looked at Dennis. Dennis did not look back at her. She looked at the floor. To my right, a chair scraped across the linoleum. Carl Ruiz, the man who had said just 10 minutes ago that I needed someone watching over me, stood up, picked up his folding chair, moved it 3 rows back toward the wall, and sat back down. No words. No expression. He simply chose a different side of the room. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever experienced inside that building. Pastor Henderson stood up from his chair. He was a tall man, quiet in the way that people get quiet after spending decades sitting beside people in their worst moments. He had led that congregation for 22 years. He had married couples and buried their parents and sat in hospital waiting rooms that smelled exactly like the one where I had woken up 10 days earlier. Dennis had counted on that reputation. He had planned this whole meeting around it. Dennis! Pastor's voice was low and even. I agreed to come here today because you told me Rachel was in crisis. You told me she was not safe. Dennis started. She isn't. I am looking at a woman who walked in here with documented proof, who has not raised her voice one single time, who has sat in this room for the last 30 minutes completely composed. Pastor Henderson turned to face the full circle. And I am looking at a father who used his granddaughter's name to borrow money that child will never remember owing. He turned back to Dennis. I believe this entire community owes Rachel an apology for being here today under completely false pretenses. Beverly Turner's voice came from near the window, thick and unsteady. Dennis Calloway. I have sat beside you in this building for 27 years. She stopped for a moment. I am ashamed of you. Carol was crying now. Real crying this time. Kind that has no performance in it. Kind that comes when every version of yourself that you built for other people to see finally falls apart in front of them. Dennis's voice cracked for the very first time. You don't understand any of this. I was going to pay it all back. I had a plan. Your plan, I said quietly, was to sell my house. He had nothing left after that. He stood in his pressed Sunday shirt, in a church full of people who had known his name for 3 decades, and he simply had nothing more to say. There is one final thing, I said. I reached into my bag one last time. As of yesterday morning, 6 Birchwood Court in Harwich is listed for sale. The room stirred. Someone in the back whispered something I couldn't catch. Dennis's head snapped up hard. You cannot do that. That is where we live. You live in my house with no lease and no rent paid. Under Ohio law, that gives you fewer rights than a regular monthly renter. I pulled 3 white envelopes from the folder. My attorney has prepared formal 30-day written notices for all 3 of you. Ohio law does not require me to give you any more time than that. I placed them on the table. 1 for Dennis. 1 for Carol. 1 in the empty space in front of Paige's chair, because she had already stood up, grabbed her bag, and was walking toward the door without saying a word to anyone. The door swung shut behind her. Not a single person moved to follow her. Dennis stared at his envelope. His hands were shaking now. Where are we supposed to go? I let that question hang in the air for a full 5 seconds. I wanted every single person in that room to truly hear it. That is the first time in 11 years you have had to answer that question, I said. I have been answering it for you my entire adult life. I want to stop here for just a moment, 'cause I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. You are thinking, was 30 days generous enough? Or was it too much? For people who tried to legally take away your freedom? Honestly, there were moments sitting in that fellowship hall where I felt something close to grief. Not for Dennis, but for the family I had spent 34 years believing in. The version where the stepmother slowly becomes your real mother. Where the stepsister eventually becomes a true friend. Where the father who lost his way somewhere deep in his 50s would, at the very end of it all, still choose his daughter. He didn't. And I had to make peace with that. I want to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. Would you have given more time or less? And if you are not subscribed yet, please do it right now. There is so much more to this story, and I do not want you to miss a single part of what happened next. The judge reviewed Jess's motion the following Thursday morning. He read the identity theft report. He read the FTC filings. He read Dr. Reeves's medical letter confirming I was completely capable of running my own life. He read the documented proof that Dennis had a direct financial reason for wanting legal control over me. Petition was thrown out. No hearing. No debate. The judge added a personal note to the court file. I am going to read it to you word for word because I want you to hear it. Petitioner appears to have filed this action for direct personal financial gain. That same week, Sergeant Nolan called me to confirm that Dennis had been officially called in for a formal interview at the Harwich Police Department. He hired a lawyer. That lawyer reviewed the evidence Jess had put together and withdrew from the case within 48 hours. The 3 fraudulent credit accounts were frozen by all 3 bureaus. The bank confirmed in writing that I would not be responsible for any of the $47,400. The account opened in Sophie's name was closed immediately. Her credit file was cleared completely. Dennis called me one Tuesday evening. I barely recognized his voice. Sounded thin and stripped of everything he normally hid behind. Rachel, please. I am going to end up with a criminal record. I am your father. I am asking you. I was at the kitchen sink washing Sophie's dinner bowl, watching the soap bubbles slowly slide off the ceramic. You should have thought about that before you put Sophie's name on a credit card, I said. I hung up. I finished the dishes. I dried my hands. I stood at the window above the sink for a little while, looking at the streetlight outside on Birchwood Court, and I felt something in my chest that had been locked tight for as long as I could remember slowly start to loosen. In a small town like Harwick, the social consequences of something like this don't all land at once. They spread the way water finds the tiny cracks in old concrete. Quietly. Slowly. From every direction at once. Carol tried to attend the Grace Community Prayer Group the following week. Beverly Turner told me about it later, gently, the way you describe something that left you sad. Carol had come in and sat down. Nobody was rude. But nobody moved to sit beside her either. She left before the opening prayer. It wasn't cruelty. It was something quieter and harder than that. It was the silence of people who simply did not know what to say to a woman who had watched her husband steal from her stepdaughter and chosen to look the other way and then sign her name to a court document helping him do it. Paige's Instagram post, the one with the wine glass and the caption about finally having peace, had been deleted within days of the church meeting. But the screenshots had already moved through Harwick the way information always moves through small towns. Phone texts, group chats, the quiet machinery of a community processing something it never expected to see. A woman at the nail salon where Paige worked part-time apparently pulled up the post on her phone one slow afternoon and just said, "Is this actually real?" Paige handed in her notice that Friday. Carol called me once, about 3 weeks after the church meeting. Picked up because I thought it might be about the move out. "You have destroyed this entire family," she said. I was folding Sophie's clean laundry. Small socks. A little shirt with a cartoon dinosaur on it. "No," I said. "You watched it get destroyed and you chose to help it along. You signed your name to a document designed to take my house and take my legal rights away from me. You made that choice. You made it a long time ago." She hung up. I set down a sock and stood completely still for a moment. My mother, Anna, died when I was 6 years old. I never got to hear the sound of her adult voice. I spent so many years trying to fill that empty space with Carol. With the idea of Carol. With the family that Carol was supposed to be the center of. That old grief had kept me quiet for 28 years. It had made me absorb things I should have said something about a very long time ago. I folded the sock. And I kept going. Dennis and Carol moved out of 6, Birchwood Court on day 27, 3 days before the deadline. I was at work when they left. I came home to a house with nail holes in the walls, carpet dents where the furniture had been, and the very specific kind of silence that a house makes when it has finally, after a long time, breathed out. I walked through every room. I didn't feel like I had won anything. I felt the way you feel after a very long and hard surgery when the patient finally becomes stable. Worn out. Relieved. Knowing the difficult part isn't completely over, but the very worst of it has passed. The house sold in 5 weeks. A young family from Columbus. First-time buyers. The wife cried a little when she walked into the backyard and saw the maple tree. Through all the closing costs, the realtor's fees, and Jess's legal bill, I walked away with $143,000. I used it in 3 clear steps. First, I paid every single one of my hospital bills in full. Every last dollar. Second, I put down a deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment in Fairmont on Clover Lane, close to Jess's office, close to a very good elementary school for Sophie, 35 minutes from Harwick, and far enough away that the air truly did smell different. Third, I opened an education savings account in Sophie's name. Her real name. With only my signature on it. For her future. Sophie started at her new school on a Wednesday. She wore her purple backpack and held my hand all the way across the parking lot. That afternoon she came home and stood in the doorway of the new apartment, looking at the small kitchen, the narrow hallway, her bedroom that was barely big enough for the bed and a single bookcase. "It's smaller, Mama." "I know. How come?" I sat right down on the floor with her, there in the hallway. "Because what we have now is completely ours. Nobody else's. Just yours and mine." She thought about that with the full seriousness that 8-year-olds bring to questions that are actually about something much bigger than they sound. Then she went to her bedroom and started taping her drawings to the wall. I stayed on the floor just a little longer. I moved to a day shift at a hospital in Fairmont. Pay was a little less, but I slept every single night. I had dinner with my daughter every evening. I watched the sun go down through a window where only my name was on the lease. 3 weeks after we moved in, a letter arrived with no return address on the envelope. Inside was a grocery store gift card and a handwritten note on pale blue paper in handwriting I recognized the moment I saw it. "Your grandmother Eleanor always told me that you had more strength in you than you even knew. She was right. Take good care of yourself, Rachel. And take care of that little girl. Beverly Turner." I read it twice. Then I put it in the drawer beside my bed, where I keep the things that truly matter. 3 months later, Dennis accepted a deal with the district attorney. He was charged with 1 count of identity theft, a serious felony under Ohio law, especially since one of the victims was a child. His attorney negotiated it down. 2 years of supervised probation, required financial counseling, full repayment over time, and a permanent criminal record. He did not go to prison. He was 62 years old, it was his first offense, and the DA's office had larger cases to prioritize. But the permanent record followed him everywhere. When he applied for a part-time job at a property management company in the next county, they ran a background check. He did not get the job. Carol stayed with him. I was not surprised. Some choices carry their own gravity. I heard through Beverly that Carol had started telling people at a new church in Millbrook, a town about 20 minutes from Harwick, that I had suffered some kind of breakdown and turned against my own family. Some people believed her. Some didn't. I noticed with genuine surprise that I did not care either way. For most of my life, I had cared enormously what people in Harwick thought of me. That need had quietly disappeared. Paige never called. I never called Paige. There was no tearful conversation over coffee. No moment where we finally understood each other and promised to do better. Some things don't end with a door slamming. Some just end with a door that stays closed from that day forward, quietly, without ceremony. I don't hate her. Hating someone takes energy I would rather spend on something real. On Sophie's homework. On my patience. On the little balcony garden where I planted cherry tomatoes and fresh basil, and where Sophie waters them every single morning before school with a small green watering can very seriously, like it is the most important job in the world. Before I end this story, I want to tell you what I actually learned from all of it. Not as advice. Just as the truths that became real for me. I learned that the people who call you dramatic are almost always the ones doing the most harm. 'Cause if they can make you doubt your own reaction to what is happening, they never have to take responsibility for what they did. Every single time I got sick, every time I was exhausted, every time I asked a question or pushed back even a little, the answer was always the same word. Dramatic. It is a word built to make you smaller. And for 34 years, I let it do exactly that. I learned that having your name on a piece of paper means absolutely nothing if you don't act like it's yours. I owned that house for 13 years and never once behaved like I was the owner. I let people rearrange the furniture without asking. I let them call it the family house until I had almost started to believe it myself. Being kind without having any limits is not actually kindness. It is just a door left wide open with no lock on it, and eventually the wrong person walks through. I learned that checking your credit report and your child's is not being paranoid. It is not overreacting. It is not dramatic. It is basic protection for yourself and the people who depend on you. If I had checked just 3 years earlier, I would have caught the first account before the balance climbed into 5 figures. If I had checked 8 months earlier, Sophie's name would never have been touched. I check both of ours every 3 months now. Takes about 12 minutes total. To check your child's credit, you contact Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion directly. You send their social security number, a copy of their birth certificate, and a copy of your ID as the parent. If a result comes back, any result at all, that is your sign that something is very wrong. A child should have no credit file at all. And I learned that the word family does not give anyone the right to steal from you. Being related to someone by blood is not the same as being safe with them. And the people who use that word the most loudly to keep you quiet are almost always the ones who have the most to lose if you ever stop being quiet. Setting a limit with someone who has hurt you is not revenge. It is the very first step toward a life that actually belongs to you. Sophie asked me last week if she would ever see Grandpa Dennis again. I told her the truth. I honestly don't know, baby. But I know that you are safe. And I know that you are loved. She nodded once. The nod she does when she has decided that is enough information for right now. Then she picked up her colored pencils and went back to her drawing. That was enough for me too. It is a Tuesday evening. The apartment on Clover Lane in Fairmont is quiet in the way small spaces go quiet after dinner. Sophie is at the kitchen table with her sketch pad, her colored pencils spread around her in a half circle like a tiny, very serious art studio. I am at the sink. Water running warm over my hands. The window above the faucet looks out over the parking lot and, beyond it, a row of oak trees holding on to the last few leaves of November. Mama! Come look. I dry my hands and walk over. She holds up the page. 2 people standing in front of a small house. Taller one has curly hair and a big smile. The shorter one is holding the taller one's hand. There are flowers along the front of the house, red and yellow and purple, and a sun in the top corner with rays stretching almost all the way to the edges of the paper. That's us, Mama. It is. She turns back to the drawing. Adding a cat, apparently. We don't have a cat. But in Sophie's world we do, and honestly I think she might be right about that one too. I go back to the sink. My grandmother Eleanor used to say something when she was doing whatever needed doing around the house, shelling peas, folding laundry, standing right where I am standing now at the kitchen sink with the window open. She would say, "A house is just 4 walls, Rachel. A home is the people you keep safe inside them." I spent 11 years keeping the wrong people safe inside the wrong walls. Called it love. Called it loyalty. I called it family. And some of it truly was all of those things. But some of it was just fear wearing the coat of love. And it took lying alone in an emergency room at 2:17 in the morning to finally, for the very first time, tell the difference between the two. Now I have 2 rooms. A daughter who draws pictures of us holding hands in front of a house with flowers. And a door I lock every single night. Not because I am afraid. Because for the first time in my entire adult life, what is behind that door is truly, completely only mine. My father stood up in that church fellowship hall in front of 30 people and tried to take everything from me. And I walked out of that building with my daughter's hand in mine and a folder full of truth. That is all I need to say about who the dramatic one was. 'Cause I do not live in his story anymore. I live in mine. Thank you for staying with me through every single part of this. If this story meant something real to you, if it reminded you that you have every right to protect yourself and the people who depend on you, please hit that like button right now. Truly helps more than you know. And if you are not subscribed yet, please do it right now. Right now before you scroll away. I share real stories on this channel. Stories about people who stopped absorbing what was never theirs to carry. Stories that might make you feel a little less alone in whatever you are going through. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one. I read every comment that comes in. Every single one. And I genuinely want to hear from you today. Has anyone in your life ever used the word family to keep you quiet about something you had every right to speak up about? What did you do? Or what do you wish you had done? Tell me in the comments below. And there is another story waiting for you in the description right now. I think the moment you read the title, you will understand exactly why I chose it to come after this one.